This is episode 5 of Villain for All Seasons. Today we'll be speaking with Thomas Handischiegal about the stock market, volatility, and everything that we did not know, nor still kind of don't know. But Tom has a good interview, so stay tuned.
It's gonna be exciting. So yeah, we got really exciting news today, Dan. Well, actually, this happened a few days ago, but our social media presence is ever growing, and we got our first fan comment.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you may remember from our last episode 4, where we were talking to the wonderful journalist Joe Embersberger, we also led in with, I did a little tirade about this new Jen Psaki bomb, hashtag Psaki bomb. And it was a little tongue-in-cheek in my Instagram posts at VFAS podcast. Like and subscribe. So I talked about our epic girl boss press secretary Jen Psaki and her epic Psaki bombs, and we got a fan comment, which is quote, "Epic Psaki bombs, laughy cryy face. Look up the word epic, and her quote unquote bombs are vanilla AF. She got nothing," all caps, on Kaylee. Speaking of Kaylee McEnany. Her usual response is, quote, let me circle back to you with that. So a little bit of the messaging was lost. I get the feeling this gentleman didn't listen to the podcast, which is fine. But I gotta say, I could not be more excited about this kind of attention. I could not be happier. It's so much better than someone just be like, if someone had commented and gone, oh yeah, loving the podcast, this is really great, but no, we're getting trolled by Trump humorists. Shout out to Grant Julian, who talked a little bit about this this phenomenon. So this guy, who I'm not going to out his tag. If you want to know, you could look at the page, like and subscribe. So I'm not gonna out this guy, but I did have to have a little look at his page. And by the way, I just want to say, this isn't a thing of I'm not going to give his name because I don't want to platform him. He actually has a bigger platform than us. He has more followers, so he doesn't need our help.
We need his help. In fact,
we need his help. Actually, he needs to start. He needs to start reposting what we do and get us into a new market. I want to get on the alt-right Trump market.
Trump train. Sorry, do you remember the actual images of the Trump train? They were trying to get literal about it.
No.
Yeah. I actually saw some cartoon images of the train.
Was it like Thomas the Train with his face in the front?
It was overly cartoonish, like Looney Tunes cartoonish.
Okay.
Very weird.
I mean, you fitting.
Yeah.
So, so I just did a little look at this guy's, and goddamn, so he is a prolific poster. We were wondering if this guy's a bot. And I'm not sure. I feel like no. What do you think?
It's almost like, what is worse? If you're looking at some of his posts, it kind of reminds me of the worst, or well, I should say the really poor political plan by the Trump team to tar Biden as some far leftist during the 2020 campaign versus an establishment figure, which made Trump so likable during 2016. So it's just all these lame memes about Jen Psaki.
Yeah. I'm looking at it because I looked at it a couple days ago, and apparently we really struck a nerve with this guy, because since looking at his page a couple days ago, there are, I think, no less than 15 new Jen Psaki things. So he's got a real issue with her. But yeah, this is like we talked about with Grant, this kind of comedy is so fucking lame. He's got a lot of memes, sort of Biden memes. So there's one of a sexy lady on a wrecking ball that's going towards a wall that says U.S. economy, and he's got Biden's head on it. One of them, where was it?
I just want to highlight this one. It's a square post, right? So it has Kayla McEnany next to Surf and Turf. and then under it, it has Jen Psaki next to a bologna sandwich.
What kind of
Modern art.
what kind of like truck stop diner humor is this?
Yeah.
My personal favorite is one that says "It's coming," ... and it has the famous picture of Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, and Biden's face is over Nancy Kerrigan's, and Kamala's is over Tonya Harding's. Vivid imagery of the impending kneecapping that's going to happen. Oh man, what else? Yeah, we got the QAnon shaman as Jack Nicholson in The Shining with AOC screaming behind the door, which that one's just tasteless. Yeah, but like it's, I would say this page is like 40% Jen Psaki.
Yeah.
Which I don't know, maybe that's a transition to go into this. Like this is, I do get why she's going to be drawing the ire of people like this, because like we spoke about in the last episode, and the story really is continuing of there's this sort of Biden bro from like the John Favreau's of the world fangirling over how great she is. And I was wondering if you could tell us about the Daily Beast article you saw. That there was also a Politico reporter who also tweeted about this.
Yeah. Before we get down in everything, I should just do a little introduction. Of course, this is Villain for All Seasons, episode 5. I'm Dan.
I'm Ben. Hello.
We were just talking about our newest fan, really our only fan from what we can tell. But who does have this like weird obsession with Jen Psaki. We're going through his Instagram page right now. Very interesting stuff. But to bring it back around to what Ben was talking about, there was I don't know if you want to call it like the first scandal of the Biden administration, but Daily Beast reported earlier this week that Jen Psaki requested questions from the press pool before the daily press briefing. This is something that goes on in every administration. There's really nothing new about it. It's just, you can understand why people are upset when they read news like this. It really does moderate the debate, no matter who's in office. So again, like it's not really a scandal, but it is, again, it moderates debate. It's just kind of lame.
Yeah, it's not a scandal in that every administration does it. Like, I do want to emphasize, as much as I'm going to talk shit about Jen Psaki, it's not that she is like there's something extraordinary about her or the Biden White House that is really a departure from any other administration. But the fact is that, well, first of all, the fact that it's common practice is not good. And that should be an issue for everyone all the time. Like White House or correspondents, they'll tell you that any administration will call you up, ask you what questions you're going to ask, and they'll do it under the veneer of, well, we just want to make sure we're as prepared as possible. And any reporter that's actually worth their salt should probably say, go fuck yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, yeah, so that's not. It is a problem, but it's not like. It's not a problem that's distinctive to the Biden White House. The problem that I'm having is, again, that we've decided inexplicably to lift up Jen Psaki as this paradigm of truth and transparency, which, again, going back to my rant last week, is not her job. She's there to peddle propaganda. So let's stop elevating her as some sort of beacon of truth. And yeah, I don't know.
I don't see why not either. Like why elevate someone who's the spokesperson for the administration? You don't have to like this person. You can respect her personal achievements, you can expect her professional achievements, but on the surface, they are a spokesperson for the current president and power. You will likely disagree with decisions made by this administration. So I don't see why there's any deference given to this person.
Yeah, well, and That's going back to our fan on Instagram. He's not incorrect in saying she's vanilla AF. So yeah, it's both sides are stupid. Elevating her as this amazing girl boss, or like our fan hating her, are both dumb wastes of your time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, get over it. She has a specific job. She's not really going to be any different than any other press secretary, aside from maybe Sean Spicer, rest in peace, who sweated and blubbered and cried on stage. So she may be a bit more competent, but at the end of the day, it's the same person. It's the same job.
I just want to highlight one more of these posts.
Oh, yes.
Wow, there's just so many good ones. Here, this is a quote post from a famous historical figure. Let me know if you figure it out by the time I get done.
Okay.
Quote, I have never known a more dastardly, nefarious scoundrel than Joe Biden. And he's a commie. This is a famous historical figure. So do you have any guesses?
A famous, okay.
Yeah, especially to this country, the United States.
Okay. A
president, even, yeah.
And he's a commie?
Yeah.
I don't know. George Washington? Is it someone who actually has been
George
alive?
Washington.
It's George Washington.
It says George Washington, 1791. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is true. He famously hated Biden.
Joe Biden was alive. Sorry, age joke.
Yeah, as was, the founding fathers across the board, they were all very anti-communism in that time.
Never Biden's.
Yeah, never Biden's, never Marx, yet to be born.
Yeah.
In 1776.
This reminds me of something I wanted to talk about with you. That Grant Gillen said that he thinks we had some great thoughts about free speech. Maybe I don't know if he said great, but we had some interesting thoughts about free speech.
Yeah, let's not assume he liked them.
Yeah. I just wonder what we said that made him think that, and does that influence your opinion of the show at all? I say this as we try to find our footing with what the show will be and what we want to talk about.
Does it influence my opinion? Or my...
Yeah. It's almost as if we unconsciously stumbled upon the free speech debate, which is something I didn't think we had really talked about.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's very important to me. I think, especially in these trying times, I think it always kind of is the issue. We act like it's like it always whatever time you're living in, it feels like the most important time always. And so it's easy to say like, oh, this is the most beyond the pale crazy thing. And it's like, well, yeah, because we're living in it now. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's why it feels so prescient right now, just because we're living through it. But I think it always is. It's always an issue. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. There's always a belief that your opinion is not being heard, right? When we have such moderated debate. I don't know if this is specific to the United States, probably not, but I do feel like anybody who does read the news and disagrees with like mainstream opinion probably feels that their opinion is not being heard, and that in some way that opinion not being heard is like stifling free speech.
Yeah, and well, maybe this is going off the rails on this, but the like whenever there's people who want to outlaw hate speech, what they're really saying, and some, their hate speech is a real thing, but the people who want to get rid of hate speech are, that's another way of saying I want to get rid of the speech I don't like, or when you believe in free speech, you believe that that's going to intrinsically be connected to what your ideals of free speech are, what you believe is, we always, everything we think is going to run through a sort of cultural sieve of our worldview. So good speech and what constitutes good speech and bad speech is always going to be run through that sieve. Whoever you are, we all, like, I'm not saying I'm apart from that. I have my own biases as well, and my own, my own thoughts on good and bad and all of that. I don't know, but I guess, like, we did talk with that, a big grant of stuff of well, do we need to let it all into the public forum to actually be able to suss out what's acceptable and what's not? And I'm more to the opinion that because you I don't know, I'm losing my thoughts here. Cut this part, but I don't know. Do you have another thought on it?
The only thing I want to say about it, and it's not really a deep thought on free speech and absolutisms, is it sucks that debate has been hijacked by the right. They are the ones on the surface ostensibly standing up for quote unquote free speech. In regards to, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or I don't know when what's his name, Ariel Pink, that indie artist, went to the Trump Stop the Steal rally. I mean, even with Julian Assange, which I find the most disappointing. So I think the left really does have a space to reclaim the free speech debate, but is really being hijacked by the right, especially in this age of, like, the specter of, like, big tech censorship.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's just the pendulum has swung. And this was, in the decades ago, it was the left arguing for free speech, because you're talking about figures like, Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or whatever, and that anti-war movements, that these need to be part of it. And then now it's just swung to the right, where people, want to have the freedom to say the Jews control the weather. And I support that freedom. But
I mean, fringe thought. It's a fringe belief that would die. Let me back that up.
Jews control.
I don't understand.
Not that fringe. widely believed.
Okay, I don't see why we give it air. In the same way that Noam Chomsky, arguably probably the most famous, like, anti-war intellectual in the world, right?
Yeah.
Completely ignored by mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean,
they'll ask you about, like, Noam Chomsky's theory, that they probably sound just as rambling as, like, a Noam Chomsky speech. So I just don't see, like, publish it, do whatever you need to do with it, but just ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny to think that, like, when's the last time Noam Chomsky was on network television? It was probably on William F. Buckley's show.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, Buckley, as for as odious as I find a lot of his worldview, or most of his worldview, credit where credit is due. Like, do you think you would ever see the voices that he had on his show on MSNBC or CNN? I don't think so. He had Black Panthers, he had Muhammad Ali, he had Christopher Hitchens, he had Noam Chomsky. I mean, like, he would actually have, he actually had these people on to debate with them.
Yeah, it was good to watch. It's like boxing. It was a big way fight,
Well, it's like, because he really did enjoy the gamesmanship of it, I think, and he really thought, and also he was confident enough in his own intellectual prowess that he was sure that he could win.
Yeah, sounds like something many of our anchors and commentators should reflect on.
Yeah, some of them do. Some of them do. I have some problems with Mehdi Hassan, but I've also seen him in some hard-hitting interviews that I liked. But that's also a cultural thing. I think British journalists in general are a little they really treasure the art of the debate.
Well, that's what makes a good interview, right? I mean, you don't want to, you're not going there for the softball. You want someone to defend their views and do it well.
and not letting people go on stuff, which is something that, for all the sins of the British media, that they don't just move on. Whereas here, and we saw that a lot in the Trump years, even like you'd have like people like Michael Flynn or John Bolton or whoever, who would be like, get a hardball question that they didn't want to answer, and they'd be like, let's just move on. And then the reporter would be like, okay,
Yeah.
like what the fuck is that? Whereas like British journalists will sit there and yell at you for 20 minutes about not answering a question, which, to American sensibilities kind of maybe is I don't know, not disrespectful, but just annoying. Maybe they don't like it. It's sort of got like a teacher's pet quality, I think, to us sometimes. And like, no, answer it. What's the thing?
Yeah.
Slipping into a Ben Shapiro. Slipping into a Ben. No, you have not answered the question. You do. Maybe you can.
Wait. That is a perfect segue. Big news. Along with our first fan, we got scooped.
We got scooped, ladies and gentlemen. It's happened here. I thought we could avoid it a little bit longer, but 5 episodes in and we got fucking scooped hard.
We were originally going to talk about Ben Shapiro's new movie. What is it? Run,
Hide, Fight.
Oh, what a title.
Run, Hide, Fight. Yeah.
But Ben let me know yesterday that Chapo Trap House, friends of the show, already did an analysis.
They got there first, and God love them for it. I love their show, and they probably, objectively probably did a better job than us. They've got more minds.
We got to see a press screening.
Yeah, it's really their elite media status that keeps them ahead of us. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But anyway, we wanted to do it. We could still talk about it a little bit, but we haven't seen the film yet. We wanted to see it, but we wanted to, we're here to stand for truth and transparency. And the truth is we got fucking scooped hard.
Watch your back, Chapo. Ben, can you give just an analysis of the film, a breakdown?
Well, I'm going to try and, forget what I heard from them and just kind of go off of, because we saw the trailer for it. You sent it over and I was like, oh, fuck yes, I've got to see it. Mm-hmm. But it is first of all, Ben Shapiro wasn't like fully involved. He was just he didn't write any of it or anything like that. But his news, what's it called again? His
Daily Wire, I think.
Daily Wire, yeah. So Daily Wire, released through the Daily Wire, and it's basically the story of a school shooting happens. So the protagonist is a high school girl whose father is like an ex-operator, Navy SEAL or something, who's instilled all of those values into her. And a school shooting happens with a group of kids who take the school hostage and are wanting to post it on social media and to, become Joker famous or something. And the girl has 3 options. She could run, she could hide, or she could fight. So she uses her operator skills to, I guess, murder everybody and save the day.
Can't wait.
So I don't know. I guess we can't really get into the analysis of it, but I do think it is I think there still is an interesting subject there of just that. There's a lot of bitching and moaning from people on the right that like Hollywood is really controlled by the left and really just espouses left-wing values and left-wing beliefs and that sort of thing. And that's, I guess, generally true. Powers that be in Hollywood and the entertainment business are more left-leaning for what I would say obvious reasons. But so the right does sort of operate on the fringe as far as Hollywood goes and the arts in general. You see a little bit of it come out here and there. I mean, obviously we got like the Mel Gibsons of the world and Vince Vaughn, and there's a little bit of it, but there's not a lot. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about what do you think about stuff like this?
Yeah, I wanted to do a little bit more research about something that we talked about during the pre-show, which is this, yeah, the split in Hollywood between left, like the Hollywood left, and this rising film of the American right. I was just trying to look over my notes about this guy named S. Craig Zoller. He did two films with, I think they both have Vince Vaughn. So there's one called Brawl and Cell Block 99. And then there's one called Dragged Across Concrete. Yeah, they both have Vince Vaughn. One has Mel Gibson. Dragged Across Concrete has Mel Gibson, along with like people like Michael J. White, Udo Kier, and like Don Johnson. But anyways, the point is like these movies are meant to tell like a right wing version of the United States versus some of the left wing films that are coming out, or perceived left wing films, whatever that means anymore. Anyways, my point is this has like a historical analog back in the 70s. There's been a lot of talk of like blaxploitation movies that came out about then. Like everybody knows about like Pam Grier and Foxy Brown, Coffee, Superfly, movies like that, of course. Less attention is paid to what are called hick flicks. The most famous would be Smoking the Bandit.
I've never heard that term.
Yeah. I recently found out about it a few years ago, and I only recently saw Smoking the Bandit, but it's interesting their comparison as well as their contrast. Of course, blaxploitation movies are almost all black cast. Usually you would have some kind of like the man, quote unquote, is the bad guy. Usually like some white guy maybe pulling the strings behind everything. Whereas a hick flick is usually anti-law enforcement. So like you have like Smoking the Bandit, of course, like they're trying to transport Coors beer from Colorado to somewhere, and which apparently used to be illegal.
Coors beer specifically?
Yeah. I don't know if it was all beer, but I think Coors, it has that Rockies connection.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not saying these are quality movies, and in fact, they're all low quality movies. So
yeah,
I wonder if we're going to see any kind of revival of this divergence.
We should, well, let's get a film scholar on and talk about hick flicks.
Yeah. There's also another curious thing to think about, and then I'll stop talking about this, is movies like Easy Rider, which is not a hick flick, but it does kind of go on to this idea of like a hippie movie, which was another little subgenre around then. Yeah. And if you think about it, like Jack Nicholson, of course, was in Easy Rider as well as Peter Fonda, but they had made 3 or 4 like motorcycle movies before that. It was a trend, and Easy Rider is just the one that broke. Kind of in the same way that like again, Smoking the Bandit stuck out, Superfly stuck out in the blaxploitation genre. So and I'm thinking something like the Cell Block 99, or excuse me, Brawl and Cell Block 99 with Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson was one of the big ones to break out in the mainstream. So I mean, I don't know, Ben Shapiro.
There are there's also this like, I mean, like Hollywood may be left, but it's very neoliberal. I mean, it's very imperialist. And I think with it seems that this Run, Hide, Fight, there are other more mainstream stuff that's going to that exists. Like, you had the American Sniper, and I guess like Zero Dark 30 and stuff like that. But like the thing of like operators, like the special ops guys, and like them being like the new cool. That's like the new cool thing for the right. It's not Jason Bourne and CIA stuff anymore. It's like a guy who wears one of those fucking scarves and has a big beard and like chugs beer and has a fucking special coffee company and hates Muslims and that sort of shit. Like that's the new obsession with the right, is the thing of like the operator.
Yeah, which I think is wrong in its own right. I think that there are, no pun intended there, I think there is certainly a space for right-wing movies to address social problems espoused by the right, but they end up with this hero worship that is just lame, misguided, and supports, just reinforces a vision of their wrong vision of the world, in my opinion. The left does this too. Don't get me wrong, but I think the right is probably the left. The right doesn't have as many resources, and they end up the resources that they do have, they use it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give us a Psaki update, Ben? Or I guess we did that already, didn't we?
We did do a Psaki update.
Yeah. Well, on that note,
we have been updated from the bomb squad. Let's add that in. Let's put that in before. Coming straight from the bomb squad, Jen Psaki. Anyway,
should we talk about then stopping Saudi arms deals to Yemen?
Yeah. Trying to. I mean, we could. Yeah. I saw the news post for this, and like it was. I had a moment where I was like, "Oh, this is amazing," which of course it's always a little too good to be true. So like, I don't even know if it's like a credit where credit is due thing. So basically the Biden administration has said that they're going to stop assisting or stop offensive support for the Saudi-led assault on Yemen. Which on its face sounds great. Like that war has been going on for 6 years now. It's resulted in 100,000 plus Yemenis killed. Another 250,000 plus have died from starvation. It's a horrible humanitarian crisis. But like that, it's not as simple as that, as all things ultimately are with international relations, and especially with arms trading with the US and Saudi. So like the idea that we're ever going to cut off Saudi Arabia from any sort of military support is on its face farcical, right? Mm-hmm. So basically they said they're going to stop supplies for them for their assault on Yemen, but they're going to continue supplying them with or helping them with the protected quote unquote like protecting their borders. Still supporting the blockade. Lest we forget one of the last acts as president, Donald Trump labeled the Houthis as a terrorist group, which means that, as long as that stands, that means that there's not banks operating properly within Yemen. So getting if relatives or other sorts of charity groups are trying to lend financial support to Yemeni citizens, that becomes incredibly difficult. And also, we still have full support of the UAE, which is also heavily involved in Yemen. So we're still supplying them with F-35s. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, it's sort of, I guess it's sort of a non-story in that way. Now that I've laid it all out, I mean, it's like it seems like more of a symbolic gesture than anything else. I don't know if this will actually improve the quality of life for actually Yemeni citizens. Obviously, Biden did lift the Muslim ban, which is great. Again, as with most of the executive actions he's taken so far, it was another layup. I'm not saying it didn't absolutely need to happen. It's really good that it did, but it was an easy layup that needed to happen. So that will supply some support for actually many citizens. But I don't know. At the end of the day, it seems to me like it's more paying lip service to people to make it seem like we're actually de-escalating things. But I don't see how this will actually really change things on the ground. And it also goes. It's also still this like, well, we need to, they're stopping quote unquote like relevant arms sales, but we're still applying or supplying support and arms to protect Saudi's border, which is flimsy as well. I kind of get like there's not any figures you can find on Saudi casualties at their borders. I sort of get flashbacks of like Israel and like Operation Shock and Awe and stuff, where they're talking about Israeli casualties when it's like one Israeli soldier for every 1,000 Palestinians killed or something like that. I'm probably overblowing that number, but it's not far off.
I think I think you're right in saying that, this is it's kind of a headline story. It's like Biden chooses to end Saudi war. And then, yeah, the devil's in the details in the sense that we are going to continue selling them arms to protect their, quote, regional sovereignty from, quote, a hostile Iran, which is just so. This is not the turn that I thought the administration would make, that they are still keeping the pressure up on Iran. Not to say that it wasn't obvious that that would happen, or there is no like continuing policy here with the Biden administration to be tough in Iran, somewhere to Trump. But again, I thought they would show a little bit more deference and try to get them back into the Iran nuclear deal. But again, as we talked about in the prior episode, I just don't see that happening.
I mean, if anything, it seems to be the opposite of that. And this is sort of, it was sort of like, it feels to me like this story was kind of gift wrapping for a way to sort of, yeah, it was sort of gift wrapping around like, oh, we're actually ramping up aggression against Iran.
Yeah.
Which if you look at, top brass leadership in the Biden administration, there's not really any indication that we would do anything other than that. As we spoke about last time with Tony A. Blinken, not really showing any. It doesn't seem like we want to re-enter the Iran deal without. I don't know. What was the word he used?
Basically, they would need to go back to the original demand set by the Iran nuclear deal, which on the surface sounds okay, but one, Europe is still committed no matter how far Iran has moved forward, and two, the Trump administration completely reneged on the deal, making Iran skeptical, blowing the whole thing up, really. So in Iran's opinion, its sanctions must be lifted, then they will comply again with the deal. The U.S. version is we will comply with the deal as soon as we will lift the sanctions as soon as you go back to lower centrifuge production.
Yeah, and it's really a shame out of all, going back to these executive orders and layups that the Biden administration could have. And I could see why of all the ones they wouldn't do this one, because there's not really any, it's an easy target to demonize, right, of Iran. Just like people either are ambivalent or have drank the Kool-Aid and really believe that Iran is this horrible existential threat. So you don't extend a lot, or you don't have to use a lot of political capital to be aggressive towards Iran. People either don't give a shit or people think that's a good thing. And it's just, it's a shame that that could have been an easy layup of like, no, we're going back to this. Of all the things that Trump undid from the Obama years, I really think that's one of the worst ones.
Yeah.
Because that, for as disappointing as the Obama years were, and for as critical of him as I have been, I would say that would probably be the best thing to come out of the Obama administration, or at least top three best things that he actually did with his time was brokering that deal.
Foreign policy wise, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for foreign policy, absolutely. It would be that in Cuba.
Yeah.
I would say. And yeah, just I think all indications show that this is it's kind of just like a continuation of what Trump was doing rather than trying to get back to where we were in 2015.
Speaking of gift wrapping, we should talk about the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, before we get into that, can we get some music by Tony A. Blinken? We should see if we can find some music from his band, right?
Oh, yeah. He's on there. So A. Blinken. But yeah, we should get some.
Yeah, well, that could be.
Could we get like a little clip of just something every time we mention his name?
Yeah, we actually have a new producer to the show. So Joe, welcome to the team. This is first assignment, I guess.
We are three strong.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to make the team as big as possible.
Yeah.
I want a whole newsroom.
Nobel Peace Prize. This is something that you were really kind of
Yeah. So I don't pay that much attention to the Nobel Peace Prize and we'll get into why I think I've been right in doing that. But I just thought I saw a funny. Let me look this up real quick. Sorry, we'll cut through this. Yeah. So I came across this article, was it last week, that Jared Kushner and his deputy Avi Berkowitz joined Greta Thunberg and Alexei Navalny on the Nobel Peace Prize nominations list. Now, and this would be, of course, for Jared Kushner for his brokering of the Abraham Accord, which was a quote unquote peace treaty between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. We'll get into that more in a moment. But really, I mean, these kind of, thousands of people get nominated every year for it. It's not really out of the realm of, it's not strange that Kushner would get nominated. I think, but the thing that made me laugh about it was like, okay, he got nominated, of course, and nominated by none other than Alan Dershowitz, because Alan Dershowitz is a chairman or a professor emeritus at Harvard. He is eligible to nominate people for the Nobel Prize. You have to be, I think it's some sort of, there's different people that can make the nominations, and one of those classifications is tenured professors. But so first of all, not surprising that Kushner would get nominated by somebody. It's funny that it was Dershowitz. I think we should maybe just talk about him for a second, because for anybody who's followed his storied career as a corrupt piece of shit lawyer, if you know anything about Alan Dershowitz, you would also know that God, the man will never turn down an opportunity to be on television or in an interview. We could probably get him on this show if we asked.
He has entirely too much power. Have there been protests at Harvard to get him removed?
Yeah, I think there has to have been. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's been there forever. And then since he came out as being like a really huge Trump supporter, and he started getting more. Do you remember he was complaining about how he didn't feel welcome in Martha's Vineyard anymore because of his support for Trump? And it was like, oh, Alan, is it because you support Trump, or is it because you're a weird, creepy piece of shit who everybody hates? But he's just like
the point of confluence there.
Yeah, he's similar to Giuliani in a way, even though Dershowitz has more of his marbles. But I've just never seen him turn down an interview. So maybe that's part of it, is just somebody was going to nominate, someone from the Trump team was going to nominate Kushner, and he wanted to make sure it was him, or he's just. Also, he's completely beholden to Trump. He'll, maybe it was someone gave him a call. So yeah, first of all, I'm interested in did someone ask him to do it, or was he just rubbing his hands together oh, I can't wait. Can't wait to nominate Jared.
I was just searching for an Alan Dershowitz lecture. Sometimes they have those online for special professors. Doesn't really seem to exist in the same way that others do.
Apparently back in the day, he was a thrilling professor to have.
I can believe it. Yeah,
his lectures were really theatrical, and he was a very charismatic guy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to sit in on an old Dershowitz.
Yeah.
Dershowitz lecture on whatever the fuck, how to get OJ off. Also, I think it should be noted too, Dershowitz I think his specialty, or really, how would you say it? We noted that Dershowitz's favorite thing on earth is to defend famous people who are almost certainly guilty.
Maybe there's like a quid pro quo idea here. It's like he's going to get nominated now for the Nobel Peace Prize for defending people who are probably guilty.
Yeah, for his
Kushner nominates him.
Yeah, for his brilliant work.
Oh my god! His on his Harvard Law School site, they have his number, his office number.
Ooh, can we get a call in? Should we call him right now?
No. Yeah. It's 9:30 on a Saturday.
He's probably available.
Yeah, he's actually waiting by the phone.
Yeah. So anyway, I could talk about the Dersh all day, and I really would like to do a full episode. Let's just like go into the storied career of Alan Dershowitz in popular culture and in law practices. But
so I would like to know his Martha's Vineyard escapades. But
yeah. Apparently there was something that he would like be like naked on the beach or something. There's something about that. He seems like a very unpleasant man. So first of all, if you look at, I don't want to belabor like the Abraham Accord too much, but I think it's worth talking about what that was, just to kind of give some context about seeing this. Really made me start thinking of like, what the fuck is the point of the Nobel Peace Prize and what does it even mean? So just quick summary, the Abraham Accord was a quote unquote peace treaty between Israel and the United Arab Emirates of like normalizing relations with them. And it was, I mean, really more of bolstering a campaign against Iran and Palestine, as you know, we just saw with the Biden administration's lifting of, or with Saudi. It's always kind of that. Any kind of story from the Middle East seems to always go back to that in one way or another. But basically, first of all, with the Abraham Accord, the UAE and Israel were never at war. Okay, that's an important thing. So it's not a fucking peace treaty in the first place. UAE is at war with Yemen and Libya, but they're not at war with Israel. They're a horrible reactionary monarchy, as are a lot of those, Arab states. And also, you should know that the UAE air defenses are manufactured in Israel and probably operated out of Israel. So they actually had a longstanding agreement. This was really just, it was a bullshit treaty to try and make it look like Trump and Jared Kushner were doing something, which, as we all know, Jared Kushner has never done anything of consequence in his entire life. Oh, and by the way, if you remember, Trump actually wanted it to be called the Donald J. Trump Accord. Because why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
But really, it's just something that led to continued colonization from Israel to Palestine and just kind of bolstering up pressure on Iran. And that's really what the Abraham Accord was in a nutshell. And so this isn't, I'm not bringing this up as a hit piece on Jared Kushner specifically. We can do that later because it's fun, but like, it isn't really about that. It's about who we nominate and why. And there has been a lot of widespread criticism over the years of Nobel Peace Prize nominees. And again, we have to, just to remind you, thousands of people get nominated every year, and then a bunch of Norwegian men in probably funny hats decides who are the top candidates. But yeah, so, take it with a grain of salt that Kushner is nominated in the first place and may not go anywhere at all. But I thought it'd be good to look at some of the other nominees and look at other winners from the past, just to show that the criticism is that this really isn't about what the Nobel Peace Prize actually stands for. It's much more political, and it's really more about, more selfish gains for political parties or countries or movements and really less about. So anyway, maybe before we go into some of the other nominees, we should just give a little rundown of what the Nobel Peace Prize was.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to give this whole history, but Alfred Nobel was a Swedish chemist. He spent his entire life working in like patenting and proliferating arms and becoming an arms manufacturer. And it's kind of actually a crazy story. So let me just pull this up. So in 1888, Alfred's brother Ludwig, I'm reading off Wikipedia as I often do. In 1888, Alfred's brother Ludwig died while visiting Cannes, and a French newspaper mistakenly published Alfred's obituary. First of all, hilarious. I hope that happens to my brother when I die. It condemned him for his invention of military explosives, not, as is commonly quoted, dynamite, which was mainly used for civilian applications. That's not important. And is said to have brought about his decision to leave a better legacy after his death. The obituary stated, Le marchand de la mort est mort, which is French for the merchant of death is dead, and went on to say Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday. Alfred, who never had a wife or children, was disappointed with what he read and concerned with how he would be remembered. So that caused him to put most of his estate into the founding of the Nobel Peace Prize, which would be specifically about people who had done work to stop the proliferation of arms across the world. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's who Alfred Nobel was. Sounds like a piece of shit, kind of, that really he was, worried about his namesake, not really about the proliferation of arms. Maybe he was. But that's what it was. So a real life Tony Stark, basically, absent Iron Man technology. But that's what the Nobel Prize is. We can cut out a lot of that. That's what the Nobel Peace Prize is. And I wanted to just kind of look at some of the other nominees. I know you looked into it too. So we already talked about Jared Kushner. We could look at some of the other nominees and really just ask the question, did any of these people do anything to stop the proliferation of arms?
Not that I could tell.
Go
ahead. It sounds like you might have more to say on this.
Well, we can go into a few. Greta Thunberg is one of them who, all respect to her and the movement she's done about the climate crisis and about raising awareness of that and trying to make that a hot button issue for everybody. Like, yeah, no disrespect to her, but I think on its face that's not fighting for world peace. That's, I don't know. It's not trying to, maybe it is, maybe I'm wrong there, but Greta Thunberg seems weird to me. Stacey Abrams about stuff she did in
Georgia.
Voting rights in Georgia. Also, very, and this is one of the criticisms of the Nobel Prize has been that it's very Eurocentric, very Anglo-American centric. So, again, all respect to Stacey Abrams and the work she did in Georgia, but what does that mean to your average Yemeni? Probably nothing. And then one of the other ones that really got me, and this is the one I wanted to talk to you mostly about, was Alexei Navalny.
Yeah, I'd done some research about this in preparation because we had talked about it earlier in the week. There's been rumors swirling about Navalny for years, and I ignored him simply for the fact that I thought he was controlled opposition in Russia. I thought for Putin, it was a good opportunity to have kind of like a straw man to just put in jail, reassert his power when need, and just show that there is opposition, but this person's actually really working with the Kremlin and not really becoming a leading force in the opposition. Upon reading, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I don't think that he has controlled opposition anymore, but he certainly is suspect in like the slang terminology, and his politics are very questionable. He's a rabid nationalist, or at least was at one time. Maybe he's reformed about that. Has said horrible things about Georgians and parts of or I would say immigrants from other Asian parts of immigrants to Russia from other Asian parts of the continent over there. Really, I guess my biggest beef after doing some of the reading, especially because he was recently so-called poisoned, or excuse me, he alleges to be poisoned by the Russian state. He flew to Germany. He then came back. He's now received a prison sentence for 2 years. He might receive an even further prison sentence. Anyways, the point is, there has been a lot of opposition to Navalny's arrest since coming back to Russia. Sounds like hundreds of thousands of people marching in his defense. But if you think about Navalny as this politician rather than just an opposition figure, you do get a more complicated picture of who he is. But the Western media doesn't really want to go into that. And it becomes something, in my opinion, that's just much worse. You tout this opposition figure as someone who is anti-Putin, so we must venerate him, without looking at any of his policies, any idea of what Russia would look like after he took power. I just find it short-sighted, and really this mistake that we keep making in the West to be so focused on boogeymen and getting them out that we don't think about something Obama said the day after. So just my little rant about Navalny.
Yeah, and I remember a journalist or a Russia expert talking to Aaron Mate a while back was talking about how he was really elevated in the consciousness of the West as like he's kind of painted as this sort of Bernie Sanders level opposition force,
anti-establishment.
And maybe he is now post-poisoning in Russia. I don't know for sure, but like this historian whose name is escaping me at the moment was saying really like before all this kicked off, he was not like Bernie Sanders level popular. He was really more like a Gary Johnson type figure. Like he was pretty inconsequential as far as Russian politics go, and is like in the consciousness of Russian people. And yeah, again, going back to his nomination, it's first of all, it's like on his face, like what has he done to broker peace around the world aside from being this symbol of anti-Putinism? That seems to be the opposite of brokering world peace to me, unless you're willing to jump to the level that Putin is the greatest threat to world peace, which I think is pretty fucking ridiculous for anybody who's paying attention. And just to go to a few other Nobel Prize winners, just to kind of drive this
one last thing.
Yeah.
It was late last night and I was doing some more research on him. So last night was me in bed just like scrolling through Wikipedia pages about Navalny and his anti-corruption foundation, which has released a few documentaries, most recently Putin's Palace, which purports to show this billion-dollar palace that Putin owns, or that was built for Putin in some, I don't know, far-flung nice place in Russia. One of Putin's friends has come forward and said it was built for him, whatever that means. But anyways, he's released a few documentaries through this anti-corruption foundation, and just doing a little research on the anti-corruption foundation, it is anti-establishment. It does seem like they are doing some good work exposing corruption. At the same time, the people involved in this foundation are very questionable. You do have some journalists, you have some writers, but the big names, not all of them have been released. It looks like it makes over $1 million a year. A lot of them are financiers, business people, connections to the West. So in Putin's opinion, a lot of Navalny's movement is based around this this Western approach to overthrow him. And with foundations like this, despite the good work they seem to be doing exposing corruption, it seems like Vladimir Putin has a point about who's trying to overthrow him.
Yeah, and we're not kind. It's not kind. I'm not trying to be a complete Putin apologist, but this is something I was talking about the other day with someone of. It's similar to like when we're talking about what's going on with the coronavirus in China, and like China's only recently opened up to the World Health Organization, who's another nominee, by the way, for the Nobel Peace Prize, but. They've finally opened up to investigations and that. And there's a lot of, I'm not going to get into it too much, but there's a lot of shady stuff about their cases and how they really have been really cantankerous to any sort of investigation from anyone outside the world. And like, surprise for that. So, but it's sort of a situation of like, no, you should not trust what China is feeding us and what they're telling us. They're a very authoritarian state. They're very secretive. There's no reason to take them at their word. But there's also a lot to gain from the West in criticizing them and proliferating rumors and hearsay and any sort of bad press that they can. So both sides are disingenuous and both sides shouldn't be trusted. And the same thing goes with Putin.
Yeah.
Should we take him at his word for anything? Absolutely not. He's a murderous thug. But that doesn't mean that every single bit of bad press you see about him is true. And it doesn't mean that everybody who opposes him is a good person, Alexei Navalny especially. So, yeah, I guess just getting back to the nature of the prize, I just wanted to like scroll through some of the greatest hits of questionable people. One, Peter Hanke is the 2019 Nobel laureate in literature, but he's been slammed a lot because he is a huge Bosnian genocide denier. What is it? In one notable incident in 2014, while receiving the Ibsen Prize in the Norwegian city of Oslo, Hanke shouted down the genocide survivors and relatives of victims, quote, "Go to hell where you already are."
Wow.
And then Hanke is known to be a great denier of former Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic, who died in 2006 while facing trial in The Hague for war crimes and genocide. Quote, "Stand up if you support the Serbs," Hanke wrote during the 1998 to 1999 Kosovo War. Also, Barack Obama in his first term was awarded the Nobel Prize. I mean, this is when I really started to like think about this. This is back in 2009. He won it really for his rhetoric. And he won it like 9 months after he took office. Who is it? Someone said, was it Brian Becker, national coordinator for the Act Now to Stop War and End Racism, was quoted saying, "This is the Nobel Committee giving Obama the You Are Not George W. Bush Award." Yeah, and I like, and going back to what we were talking about at the beginning with Jen Psaki and stuff, that seems, that's we're going to continue seeing a lot of this. Only it's the "You're not Donald Trump." And then, of course, after this, high-minded rhetoric in his first year in office and from campaigning, he went on to start several conflicts in the Middle East and Afghanistan, and carried out drone strikes against civilians and extrajudicial killings or assassinations, murdering, as you would call it, in layman's terms. What else? The EU won in 2012.
I just want to say one thing about Obama.
Yeah.
My favorite one, in contrast to the point of this award, which is reducing arms conflict around the world. When Obama was visiting Shinzo Abe, Japan's then Prime Minister, during his last year in office in 2016, during Obama's last year in office in 2016, as he was laying the wreath on the victims of Hiroshima bombing, the administration was planning more sophisticated, smaller, and more concise nuclear weapons. So,
yeah, I mean, basically, the idea that any U.S. president could ever be nominated for this award is a joke.
Kissinger won.
Kissinger won. I was going to get to him.
Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, EU in 2012, this was heavily criticized, not the least because of economic pressure it is historically placed on some countries like Greece after their crisis in 2009. The EU also is the leading EU country. I'm quoting from TRT World, fine news source. The leading EU countries' arms sales to the Middle Eastern countries that engaged in war or conflicts were seen as inappropriate with the principles of the prize. Yeah, so EU heavily criticized. Whatever you think about the EU, they are responsible for a huge amount of armament sales and imposing austerity and all sorts of other things. And then sort of the granddaddy of all of these, of course, is 1973, Henry Kissinger. U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger shared the 1973 Peace Prize with North Vietnam's, I'm probably going to butcher this, but Lee Duc-Tho, for what turned out to be failed efforts to end the Vietnam War. Lee Duc-Tho also, I believe, declined the prize because obviously nothing had been accomplished. And like, if Kissinger doesn't tell you everything you need to know about this like that this award is absolutely meaningless. I mean, like that man has probably more blood on his hands than just about anybody in world history of the last 50 years. From his work in Vietnam, bottoming of Cambodia, Laos, I mean, Kissinger's just, yeah, he's like, he just keeps coming back and he's never going to die. That's also something I firmly believe. I believe, if I'm not incorrect, he is 197 years old.
My champagne is aging.
Years young, yeah. He takes a little bit of the souls of every person he kills. But yeah, so I don't know. I would love to talk to somebody who's like, who has done more historical work on this. But it's an interesting thing to really question, the Nobel Peace Prize specifically, but I think kind of these sorts of accolades in general. Do they mean anything? Are they useful to us, or are they just really political tools at this point? So we talked a little bit last week about what's been going on Wall Street with this GameStop Wall Street bets situation, and we gave our uninformed opinions a little bit, but we thought it would be nice to actually talk to somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about a little bit. So a friend of Dan's has agreed to speak with us. We spoke with him the other day.
Yeah, we'll be speaking to Tom Handischiegal, someone with a name even more complicated than mine. So Tom had worked on Wall Street during the dot-com bubble. We get into that a little bit. We also talk about what's going on with GameStop, how it was basically the biggest story of last week and has weirdly been suppressed this week. One thing that Tom does talk about in the interview that he wanted me to highlight a few days later is something called Dogecoin, and that there was a coordinated effort to drive up the price of Dogecoin at 9 p.m., a little bit after we spoke. So he texted me this morning and he goes, Doge now up 367% for the last month due in large part to this man. And then he sent me a Twitter page of Elon Musk. Musk had been promoting Dogecoin and driving up the price. He goes, he's joking and it is flying. Surreal. And I said, and in fact, it's actually a fake currency, unlike somewhat similar to like the US and how we can just keep printing money. It's not like it's not hard currency based on anything. Whereas Bitcoin, there is a limited amount. So just some context there. But I say, amazing. We're recording today. We'll definitely mention this. It's fake, right? And I say, if so, how can something have fake value? How can something fake have value? He goes, it's a real currency started as a joke, a tribute to a breed of dog. He goes, I'm personally holding and making my money on it, but I understand it can go easily go to no value. Unlike Bitcoin, which has a finite number of coins that can be mined, Doge is effectively a limitless supply, more akin to the US dollar. So again, get in now for Dogecoin. Be
It'll probably
prepared.
be too late by the time you're listening to this, but
That's true.
we are getting into it.
Yeah.
And we're going to pump all of our Dogecoin riches into really expanding the show, getting our newsroom running, and not paying our interns.
Yeah, yeah. At a time
Yeah.
when print is failing, Ben and I are banking on podcast money.
Yeah.
Oh, we should have a little disclaimer about this episode. It does start a little bit deep, but hang on. Give it a few minutes and it warms up really nicely.
We
So
were confused too for a little bit of it, but
yeah, so hang tight. We're going to be talking with Tom Handischiegal about the stock market, past, future, everything in between. Today, we're going to be talking about Gamestop, AMC, the craziness going on basically all last week with the stock market and kind of the fallout and everything else in between. We're going to be speaking today with one of my friends, Tom Handischiegal, who worked on Wall Street in the early 2000s, and Tom still works as a trader. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah, more or less. I do a little bit of that too. In the ballpark.
Cool. Yeah. If there's any adjustments at the end, we can go for it.
Yeah, no worries.
But Tom, why don't we get into it? And could you just give us your personal history, how you got on Wall Street, all your credentials there?
Yeah, so basically I got in right at the transition from regular brokerage into the deep discount brokerage. So I worked for National Discount Brokers for Ev Lang, who basically is like the pioneer of coming up with what at the time was like crazy cheap trades. So like $12 or whatever, and then it got lower and lower, sort of paving the way for Ameritrade. National Discount at one point was purchased by Waterhouse, or they had some kind of merger, and then that became part of TD. So basically all of this amorphous collections of traders became what paved the way for the likes of Robinhood. And so, having seen what happened in 2000 versus today, complete, almost like flip sides of the coin, which we can get into. But I started out doing customer service, and in that era, you'd had to be licensed to start with, and then I more or less became an order taker. So I got to see from the inception of what this actually meant for the retail investor and bringing in like all this new talent and, which I think became talent, but like the idea that I think you guys were talking about last week, demystification of the brokerage, the idea of like, there's not some, omnipotent person who really understands everything. And just once it opened up, you start to realize the retail trader has, just as much say in the market as a hedge fund, for example. So.
And on that note, can you talk about what Robinhood actually does? What makes it accessible to retail traders?
So, I mean, Robinhood, honestly, I feel like they're important just because they're the first people really pushing the commission-free trading, which, like anything else, it's not really free. So, they're selling order flow, and that becomes part of their model. I think the Robinhood innovation, more so than just the free trading, though, is really just the interface and making it so easy to do on your phone. Also, very low margin rates. A lot of these traders who started on Robinhood never actually had access to buying power like that before. Even now, they just dropped it, so it's only like 2.5%. And I think that's a lot of it, and also allowing the unskilled investor to get into options market, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I kind of feel like it's not to be glib about it, but like sink or swim, you come in, you figure it out, you learn. So I don't really have a problem with that compared to what, other hedge funds and people have traditionally ripped off investors anyway. So better, at least if you make a mistake trading options, you learn from it. And maybe that's a harsh lesson, but I don't think that the government coming in and telling someone they can't trade helps. So I think Robinhood really did open this up for regular people, which is why I think there's a lot of valid criticisms of Robinhood and people not getting the level of trades and stuff that they were selling off and allowing someone to really understand how much interest is behind a security. That being said, I still think it's important what they did, and you couldn't have the GameStop play if there wasn't all these new investors through Robinhood.
I think this brings up something we were talking about in the pre-show, and don't take this wrong way, Tom, but there's a lot of jargon associated with Wall Street. So if we could talk maybe about like options, securities, defining a short, all that good stuff for the layperson on the street and myself as well.
And me, so I'm a layperson.
Basically, like just the kind of like Cliff Notes version of all this stuff is when you buy a stock, you're buying X number of shares in a company. And typically, I mean, as an investor myself, I purposely like prefer on the long side of the trade. So you believe a company has a good product, it's undervalued, it's going to go to such and such number. Short side of the market means you're betting against that. So you're basically selling shares, and when you do it on a hedge fund side, you're often selling shares you don't own. At today's price, you're betting the stock's going to go down, and then you buy to cover. So pretty much like if a stock is trading at $50, you think this thing is going to tank. You sell shares that you've borrowed from another institution at the 50, thinking it'll tank, and then buy back at $2. So if you're wrong about that bet, you could potentially have unlimited losses. So when you're doing it on a retail investor, like Robinhood doesn't really let you short, but it allows you to kind of get into those trades on the options side of the market. So an options contract is basically, it's off 100 shares. It allows you to buy a given stock at a certain price, and then it has an expiration date. So you can utilize the contract, exercise the option up until such and such date. And then that is also a negotiable instrument as well. So you can sell, if like I buy an option to purchase AMC at a certain price, I can sell that option to someone else before the expiration date. So that's kind of, I don't know if that's making it simpler, or if I'm just going to.
Well, one thing I've found that is interesting is what is the result of a short? Like, what does someone gain by shorting a company or stock?
Well, actually, that's kind of the crux of what people are talking about as the concern with GameStop, right? So certain investors don't believe in shorting the market at all. I'm kind of mixed about it. I think that it can add liquidity to the market. I think you always want to be able to bet on either side. But the danger in shorts, as it stands today, is that with the depository trust company, so if your DTC used to be like, you'd have to have like physical shares. So if you have 1,000 shares outstanding, you could only short up to 1,000 shares. And that's actually, underpinned by the actual physical certificates, right? So when the DTC switched and made this all electronic, what allows that now to happen is the float, you could be trading shorts up to, like in the GameStop example, it went to 140% of the float. When you see that, there's some kind of, basic inefficiency there. Like if you have 1,000 shares, you should not be able to short anything more than those 1,000 shares outstanding. And that's where it gets, when we get into 2008, where they started shorting all the bank stocks, rightfully so, because they were leveraged on, mortgages that were about to fall into nothing. And they had like changed the way they define this. The government came in and said you couldn't short those stocks anymore, those bank companies, because they were afraid the whole banking system would collapse. So that's where you get into the danger of whether or not we should allow shorts. And then with the GameStop play, of course, Elon Musk famously got involved because everyone had been trying to short Tesla forever, which, you try to short Apple or Tesla, you do it at your own peril. Every person who tries to short it is destroyed. Even when you have a good short, like Bill Ackman, when he was trying to short like Herbalife back in the day, like that's a genuine Ponzi scheme. He was completely correct in that. And he's like a scumbag in other ways. But as far as the trade itself, he was right. It's like it made sense to short Herbalife. Nonetheless, he lost $1 billion on that bet or something like that, because there was enough backing from the government, and they had a lot of people on the board who helped them. So
I feel like short is always used in like a pejorative term, and it seems like maybe that's not the case always. And then you also mentioned on the retail side of things, Robinhood does not allow someone to short. If you could maybe answer both of those.
Yeah, so Robinhood, the only way you can kind of play a short is you're basically always have to be covered on any position. So you more or less can play the bullish side of the market or the short side based on your options call. So you can sell a put, or you can write a covered call, or you get all these things, but you always have to have the underlying shares on Robinhood. So you don't have unlimited losses the way that a hedge fund does. So if the AMC trade starts, performing poorly for a Robinhood trader, they don't really have the same risk that a hedge fund did trying to cover that, if that makes sense. I don't know if it gets a little too deep into it, but basically, if you're selling something you don't own, that stock could potentially go to the skies, and then you've got to cover that, and you never really know what your loss will be. Whereas the way the Robinhood is structured on their platform, you're only losing, what you put in. Mm-hmm. So right. You don't have, and it can be confusing, like the kid who killed himself. He just didn't understand options, and he wasn't, he had bunch of the trades hadn't settled, and he just had a misunderstanding of what was happening on the account. But he really wasn't this unlimited losses. Now it gets a little dicier with the margin, and if you get a margin call and they're forcing you to sell securities, but that's the other side of it too.
That's one thing I want to ask, and then Ben, feel free to jump in. Let's talk about the difference between a retail trader and a hedge fund. and maybe the makeup of a hedge fund and why they would have unlimited losses versus someone who it's pretty obvious if they just put in whatever they put in, that's all they can lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a hedge fund. The presumption is someone is expert, and so they allow you to be a little more dangerous. And a lot of times, as we're discovering, the hedge funds are not any more knowledgeable than a lot of the retail side of the market. I don't mean to keep going back to GameStop, but these companies, it's almost like we had the type of collusion from the retail side that we've always had on the hedge funds, because GameStop clearly was not worth that. AMC, I mean, I was in the AMC trade myself. I was into it because I believe in cinema, but there's no part of me that was like, this is a good investment right now. And anyone paying attention, I mean, the CEO of AMC was saying, in December, he's like, we're going to be bankrupt by January or mid-January. We don't have enough money to survive. So they were like issuing new shares. Anyone paying attention should see the risk of that trade. So kind of on both sides, there was a lot of ignorance, but for a while it worked out on the Reddit side, where the Wall Street bets, they were pumping this up and it really worked well. Now they're kind of learning the hard way that, there's a lot of money on the other side. I also think hedge funds from the beginning have been on both sides of the trade anyway. And then this is also goes back into the big short thing where you have Michael Berry, who famously shorted like the housing market. He was bullish on AMC, not on AMC, I'm sorry, on GameStop, because he's like, oh, I see some value in it. And then it turned into this ridiculous thing where he could no longer support the trade of being long, GameStop.
And then just one last thing.
It's basically just the danger that they allow you to trade with versus retail versus hedge fund.
Yeah, and what are they trading with? If it's not their own money, basically.
Exactly. And well, this actually one, I hope I'm not going too tangentially, but like if you look at the guy who's always on CNBC, Mohammed Al-Arian, and he's got like a big group of funds called like the Allianz Fund or something. During COVID, they have one of their funds that has like firefighters' money in it and teachers' unions and like all these, regular people who, put this into 401k. What ended up happening is that fund was set up where the traders only get a commission based on performance. So they're into COVID, they're like, oh, we're not making any money. So what they did is, because it's not their own money and they only get a commission if they get a return, they decided to bet against the VIX, which is like the volatility index. So in doing this, obviously it blew up. Not only was it a horrible bet, they weren't going to get paid anyway that year. So they still have jobs. They just don't get commissions, which they wouldn't have gotten had they made the sober decision, like, okay, we just didn't perform this well because we're going into COVID or whatever. But instead they risked everybody's money to do this. So that's I'm hoping that the lesson for all of these things is maybe put greater scrutiny on how the public's money is spent. But I don't want them to turn around and put the same caveats and restrictions on the retail investor, because at a personal level, you should be able to learn from your mistakes. And as long as those disclosures are present. So that's my main concern, is that they're going to come away from that and take away the wrong lesson as far as like, we have to restrict this trading. Or they're also trying to claim that people on Wall Street bets are artificially, that they illegally moving the markets. There's nothing wrong with hyping a stock. Like that's the way the markets were designed, like you're supposed to be able to say, I believe in this, and have somebody counter it. It's like the same thing of like, you want your press to be adversarial, you want your traders to be adversarial with each other, and always question why someone's doing it. Always realize there's someone on the other side of the trade. And that's why it's never as simple as like, oh, we got the hedge funds, because there's hedge funds who are bullish on that side as well. So
you mentioned the situation of Herbalife, which I wasn't familiar with, but I did want to ask you if it seems to me, from the thing that's been so exciting about this is that it doesn't seem that, at least to most people, that there is any kind of historical analog to this situation of what happened with GameStop. And first of all, is that true, or is there something comparable? Because I think that, Michael Berry sort of gets like deified in movies like The Big Short, and he's sort of seen as this sort of, I don't know, folk hero sometimes, which I don't really understand that characterization of him. But yeah, I wonder if, is there a historical analog of this? And if so, is it any way similar, or is this really the first of its kind of this kind of situation?
I hesitate to ever say something's the first of its kind, but yeah, I think it's the first of its kind.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing that compares. And also, the big piece of this that no one's talking about is the desperation of, in lockdowns where you take a whole generation of people, you tell them, they can't go to work, they can't leave the house, they're not going to school in person. If you feel like, okay, I may not be able to work again, or they're talking about universal basic income and all these things, right? So what does that do? It sort of engenders high risk behavior. It's great that it worked out for some of these traders. And I'm not saying, oh, don't do it, because I think that's their right. And I think that's important that the retail investor has that right. But like, they're really pushed to the complete crazy level of desperation. And I think on the crypto side, I'm always cracking up about Dogecoin, because it's the same kind of thing. Like, a cryptocurrency that was created as a joke is now worth $6 billion because people are so desperate that they're like, okay, we'll band together and hype this up. And that's still cool. I mean, people are making money on it, but like, what does that mean for what's happening in the country? Is it means no one can go to work. The best hope for any sort of return that you can live on in the future is to risk all of your capital in this.
As I said before, talking about this with, I think in our last episode, is I can't help but enjoy it. It's the first story that was like fun to me, because there's something really wonderfully poetic about it, especially the fact that it came from this sort of gamer culture. I think in the subreddit group, someone described them as a mix of 4chan and a Bloomberg terminal. And so there was a certain poetic justice about these gamers who were in this desperate place that we're all in, banding together to save this place like Gamestop, which for people who are in that culture, it's a sort of a symbol that's very near and dear to their heart. But it's also wildly depressing at the same time, of like, where do we go from here? Like, do you think there's something that is this sustainable at all? Or is this kind of like a flash in the pot that we get to enjoy for this moment?
That's my concern, actually. So, okay, so I want to answer the question directly, because for the next few years, hopefully, it'll be sustainable in terms of like at least the opportunity for the regular investor. But I think ultimately, the corporations will figure out how to like clamp down on this, because it's a way around them controlling the narrative. Them, like, one of the things that's so interesting about the pandemic is we don't really get, and I'm not even talking about conspiracies, like we just will never get the full story. If Amazon owns one of the biggest papers, in the world, and they're not going to tell you of what the prices of a lockdown are. They're not going to discuss these things at all, because they're making money hand over fist. They control it. They're getting into the medical space, so we're really in a position where there's so few voices of actual opinion. And one of the things that I really enjoy about the Reddit groups is, there's like a frat boy, Jordan Belfort kind of thing that's annoying, but it also is like a actual free speech, like, just in terms of like picks, people criticizing each other, saying stupid things. And what I'm afraid that's already happening, and the way they like shut down any sort of dissent, and that's what this is. It's like an organized Occupy Wall Street, which I think is awesome, that actually hits them where it counts on the money side. But I think, the first thing they come out and they're like, oh, well, these groups are racist. I'm like, no, there's idiot frat boys, but there's nothing racist about these groups. Like, there's every ethnicity. I mean, I think it definitely skews heavily with dudes, but there's no, it's not like there's platforms, they're not supporting any sort of racism. This is just like, so they're throwing everything at the wall to like shut down people from using these. But interesting, since the story started, Wall Street Bets is now 8.5 million people. And I think when I was watching it in the beginning, it was like 2.5 million or something, like a week and a half ago.
Well, it's always curious how these accusations of racism or homophobia or sexism, whatever it is, seem to come out at the most convenient times, that we'd never heard anything about that before this. And then all of a sudden, once there's this huge amount of success, it reminds me of like the Bernie Bros stuff that happened. As soon as Bernie started kicking ass in primary campaigns, all of a sudden it's this toxic environment that we never heard of before this. So yeah, that was a question I had too, of thinking of like, as soon as this happened and I was enjoying it, I was thinking, well, there's no way this is sustainable, because they're going to find a way to shut it down. And obviously this is like this sort of discrediting them with, racism or whatever it is a way to discredit them in the media and popular culture. But like, what would it actually look like to stop this, if you had to guess, or do you not know? I mean, is that something, do they make up a new rule that we've never heard of? Or?
Well, I think they may just outright shut it down, right? So, I mean, obviously we saw with like Parler, if there's some like, idiot right-wingers on Parler who do something, right? They shut down the platform, but obviously like the Capitol, for example, that whole thing was organized on YouTube and Facebook first and foremost, and they're not taking those platforms down. So like that's kind of the start of it. So I think with they had already in the UK, I think it was one of the Discord groups they shut down over like the GameStop thing. So I could see them kind of playing whack-a-mole and just shutting down, individual Reddits and subreddits, like,
right.
And you just scare people off, or you keep putting the experts on TV going, you show 2 horror stories of people who lost all their money on GameStop because they bought in at the high, and like, maybe just try to scare regular people out again,
So go after their modes of communication and through the media rather than any sort of effective legislation or regulating the market or in any way.
I think
they're not going to change that.
I don't think they can change that for a while, because I think it's at the expense. Like, I don't know if they have it nuanced enough to just shut down what they want to shut down. And right. I think Biden in power, I think they're too, and maybe rightfully so, with trying to make sure that they can get the stimulus through. They got to keep the Republicans on board, so they can't do anything that's like limiting the financial side. I do think they might be able to get through some kind of short stock like legislation, but they already had targeted the short sellers with the banking stocks in 2008. So I think they could do that again. And that I don't necessarily think it's a good thing, but at least that's not really on the side. I mean, most of the regular investors on the retail side, they're not really able to fully short like we talked about. So I don't think that impacts them. But I do think in this context, because if you can go 140% of the float, so the float is the number of real shares outstanding, I could see them legislating that probably in the near future.
One thing I want to ask about that is, or something that you said earlier, I should say, what they're trying to police now, or maybe deem the legality of now, is something that hedge funds have been doing the entire time.
Yeah, and when you think about it, like if you watch, I mean, I like Jim Cramer. I think he's entertaining. Like that, it's not necessarily, but if you watch these guys, they're basically hyping stuff for their friends all the time. Like that's the point of it, like I still remember, when Steve Jobs came back to Apple and they just christened him and everybody was like, oh my God, Apple's back. And he obviously was an innovator, an important figure, but before that could even be proved out, when he came back after the disastrous run of different CEOs they tried post Jobs, you basically had every fund giving this guy an endorsement because they knew that was going to push the market. So like, it's very difficult to say what's wrong about 500,000 Redditors saying we're all going to buy Dogecoin at 9:00 tonight, which they're actually doing tonight. So I'm curious if that moves, but if that actually happens, right? Like, how is that any more nefarious than what the hedge funds do? And isn't it a good thing if you're taking poor people who are willing to get into a risky, stupid investment, A, to prove a point? And then I also like B, also to kind of metaphysically be like, we can just make the market. And I think what excites me about it is it's like taking like the Yippies when they would try to like levitate the Pentagon. We can take something that has no value and just through sheer will make it a real company again. Because if you throw enough money in, it'll happen and it'll turn into something. I mean, Amazon didn't make money forever. And I was always talking shit about like Amazon being like, this cannot go up. And then finally I was like, all right, you just have to buy Amazon, because the market had dictated that they just liked that Bezos was like getting into every sector. I thought he was a really sloppy CEO. I thought everything they were doing money-wise was just ridiculous and destructive. But if the market and the hedge funds keep pushing and all the analysts on the network say this is the guy, even though he was horrible and just losing money. I mean, how do you go from like selling books on the internet to now, delivering pizzas with drones and, taking control of our healthcare system and, owning our media? Like, these are all things that it's kind of the same magic, only it's always been in the hands of the elites. So I think that I'm really excited by just the idea that regular people can magically turn something that's garbage and make it gold. I think that's kind of where we're headed. So
you brought up the media, and that's something that I wanted to focus on too. I mentioned in the intro, this is like the biggest story of last week. I want to just talk about emphasis. Like, clearly, like I said, last week was big and this week not so much. Can you talk about maybe what's happened in the market and if there's maybe some agenda behind this emphasis?
Well, I think there's going to be a whole other blow up of this story, because I think what's happening now is they're trying to calm people down. The big players are just pouring money into, regular blue chip stocks. So you've seen the day this happened. I mean, I was up like something really dumb on my AMC the morning this happened. And I was like, I wasn't even following it from the Reddit. I was just like, I thought AMC was a cool trade and there were big premiums on the options. Anyway, I'm looking at it. I see I can't sell because Robinhood was shut down and just, and I'm like, okay, something big is happening. But that actually impacted the overall market because everybody had to pull their money out of real companies to put it into this garbage GameStop and AMC to cover these shorts, which was so cool. So now I think what they're doing is when you see like, all the crying billionaires, now there's the other set of billionaires like Mark Cuban is just trying to keep the pitchfork wielding masses from attacking him. They're all coming in and I think pouring money back into regular companies as well, because they're trying to give the illusion that the market is functioning properly. I think the next blow up is going to be because the Reddit groups, the story's not dying down. You can see how many people keep getting added to Wall Street bets. That means that the next thing they start pushing is going to have real world implications again. And some of them, they're just not talking about like Sundial, like one of the weed stocks. I just was kind of, I put a couple bucks in there this week because I'm like, oh, I see the push for it and I'm trading options on it. And then all of a sudden Robinhood doesn't let you trade options on it. And it's like, because this is all moving. So like, there's still these like smaller companies that are like, making pretty big movements behind the scenes. And again, if you have a Reddit group that goes from 2 million to 8 million, presumably anyone who's actually going to go to this thing, Wall Street Bets, is trading. And if Robinhood got to like 13 million users in record time, I think there's another like shoe that's going to drop. And it's going to be something stupid that everybody puts their money in. And suddenly, I think that's what it's going to be. So anyway.
One last thing I want to focus on that, and I'm sure Ben has a question as well. Again, Robinhood, they prevented you from trading Sundial, right? And that is not something they would do to a hedge fund, or it's simply because Robinhood is the retail trading monopoly at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little difficult with Robinhood too, because like I say, I think like Baju and Vlad, like when you realize their background, and there's like these two Stanford kids, their background is in high frequency trading. They make all sorts of money, and then they start to say, oh, well, let's open obviously their intentions were never that pure from the beginning, but I don't think in this case that it's malicious on their part. I mean, there's tons of shady stuff with this. I mean, it's any company, but I think what the issue is that their clearinghouse requires a level of cash that they don't have with the influx of new traders. And if everybody's going into one position, there's no way they can actually meet their regulatory requirements. Like when I was on Wall Street, when I was at NDB, we cleared through like Pershing, and these are like really, solid clearinghouses, but they have like all these requirements for the brokerage. And then we never had that kind of volume that you'd ever worry about the funding aspect of it. And I think Robinhood, this is unprecedented for them. And I think the few companies that have maybe been able to withstand it a little better don't have an interface as good as Robinhood. So even with the problems of Robinhood, like a Charles Schwab has enough cash on hand to do it, but it's just not as well designed. They're not only going to charge you 2.5% on the margin. They're not going to let a regular person do level 3 options trading. So you almost have to keep using it for this strategy to work. So I like bashing what's happening with Robinhood, but I'm also realistic going, I don't see another alternative for now. And I think this may change in a few years where other companies will be able to compete with it, or the bigger brokerages just have to decide we're going to allow more risk, for ourselves doing this.
You mentioned Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos earlier as well. And there's one thing that was interesting to me about watching this is that there was like a lot from Silicon Valley and big tech who were really loving watching this happen to hedge funds and Wall Street. And I understand there's something of like, I guess, a little bit of a cultural rivalry, I suppose, between big tech, Silicon Valley, and Wall Street and that sort of thing. I wonder if you could speak to that at all, or if you had any opinions on that of, I don't know, maybe this is like a personal bone I have to pick with Elon Musk, but there's a certain lionization of him that bothers me. So, I was wondering if you could speak to that of like, it's easy for us to all hate on hedge funders, and, rightfully so for many, many reasons, but I worry that the tech side of it becomes all of a sudden the heroes in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, because I mean, like with Tesla, for example, as much as, I think it's a great product, the hedge fund should have been shorting Tesla. Like they weren't making money. Like it was, the balance sheet was horrible. Like it made sense to short Tesla. And I think the Silicon Valley rivalry with that is that they're coming into it looking at like, they're trying to make this magic, and they're trying to be like, it's almost like the same thing. Like the previous generations, maybe the Wall Street guys were deified. And I think on the tech side now, they consider them all geniuses, but you can clearly see that these are not. Everyone's, flawed people. There's no like hidden wealth of knowledge. And I think that they're having to deal with like, it's almost like in some respects, the hedge funds have been a good check against some of Silicon Valley, what they're doing. And their whole thing is to keep making it metaphysical and to keep building it up into something where, I mean, if you look at just like the IPO market this year, like anything tech related, it does have these kind of like, 2000s, like early 2000s, like crash kind of thing. And I'm not saying this crashes, because I think with printing money, the world has nowhere to put any money other than the stock market. So I don't think we're heading for a crash, but I think that the Silicon Valley side of things, they want to like hype up their brand and their companies in this like magical thinking type of way. And then they're up against the reality of what their numbers actually are. And I think no one wants to hear that. And they're particularly averse to critique at all. And I think just culturally, we're in a moment where like no one wants critique, right? So if you can't ever call someone out, if you're a hater, then what do you do, right? I think, and because they're increasingly controlling all of the messaging, I think ultimately the hedge fund kind of idea will die out. But that doesn't mean it's being replaced by something better or less nefarious. So I think, I think Elon Musk is a cool figure. And I wouldn't go on the level of like where I'm like, oh, this is someone I'm going to look up to. I can kind of see, like, I see the merits in what he's trying to do. But I also think that anyone who was shorting that was totally in the right. And they should have actually been rewarded for it, but it just wasn't going to happen. So
it's interesting you bring up the crash in the early 2000s. I'm assuming you're talking about the dot-com, the dot-com bubble. And I had wanted to ask you about that anyway, but I think, going back to the idea of historical analogs, I hadn't thought of it that way. Is that, if you could explain if that's what you meant of that, the similarity between what we see with big tech now, is that basically what was happening? Because as I understand, the dot-com bubble really, was able to become what it was because they were, there was some trading commodities online for the first time, which was, it was sort of stuff that's really basic for us to conceptualize now, but at the time they were kind of selling something that sounded absolutely magical, right? And would you say it's a similar idea, just maybe a little bit less flimsy or less overblown, or?
Yes, but I'm actually want to speak to the other side of it, because I think what to me is interesting about the dot-com side bubble is that the investor in late 90s going into the 2000s, they were so optimistic because the technology meant freedom and it was this wonderful world vision, right? So you're going to throw anything. I remember like drkook.com, like the former Surgeon General had a website and they traded that. And like that stock did well, what was the other one? They had like disc makers. So if you're burning a CD, like anything, it's just the dumbest stocks were doing really well. But it was because everybody wanted a piece of that future. And there was like, the economy started to improve and everybody was in this mode of like a positivity. And now we've got the same level of people having to throw their money into the market, but it's coming out of desperation and sadness because there's nothing. So if the Fed prints money, right, there's no interest, right? So you can't put your money in the bank. The dollar becomes worth less. So if you have $1,000, you're better off putting $1,000 into Tesla stock and then whatever's left over, buy whatever. So it's like, you don't have the ability to save money. So like both things create this sort of bull market, but one is coming from desperation and sadness and things being really bad. And one was from optimism. Like my takeaway from it is that like, this could end up in a similar thing, but I think this run will probably be longer because there's no one to put the brakes on printing money and the rest of the world has nowhere else to put their money other than US equities.
So it's basically worse, but we're all sad now right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, because if you look, the stock market it's been on a tear since the pandemic and you're like, how is this possible? Yeah. And then you realize, well, in the blue chip names, it's really possible because the stocks actually are worth more money because they're just, everyone's stuck at home and like anything vaguely, even like Netflix, which was kind of in a dangerous position before the pandemic. Now it's like, well, you have time to watch your Disney Plus Netflix plus your HBO Max because no one's leaving the house. So it's like, it's not a bad thing for Netflix anymore.
And just one, sorry, Dan, I know you want to get in, but one more thing about the dot-com crash. So it was this absolute complete kind of catastrophe for, as you said, all these dumb sites. How the fuck did Amazon get out alive? Was that because just the power, like you were saying before, the powers that be just kind of decided that was the good website that they wanted to save, or?
That's my theory, because
forever
I was saying this, and then that was like, I mean, most of the time I've been fairly decent about picking stocks, but Amazon I've always been wrong about it.
Okay.
I mean, I spent like at least like 6 years, making fun of Amazon, just like.
So Bezos just actually literally did a deal with the devil then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to round out that conversation,
beat him in a fiddle contest.
That's actually a good image.
On the dot-com bubble and it bursting, what caused the burst, and what came up in the ashes?
I actually don't know how to I mean, it's sort of like, with even like in the 20s, that's a very good question, because I don't know if it's just at a certain point, fundamentals do matter. And that's, but I don't really know the precipitating event, I mean, obviously, when you get into 9/11 and stuff, I could see that, but then again, the other part of the messaging that that no one ever talks about is with any of these like crashes. Basically, since the Fed has become so actively involved, everything from Nixon getting off gold and all this stuff, you haven't had any reason for a crash to be long-term. So if you look at 87, even if you just held on, you'd be in the money by like 89, 90. So like, there's really, there's sad things. And there's some people, if this happens to you in your retirement age and it's your funds, that's a tragedy. And there's a whole other side to that story. But for most people, if you're under 60 and you just hold on, they're probably coming back. So, I mean, I think that maybe fundamentals started to matter. Maybe it was just the geopolitical aspect that by the early 2000s, we were having such other major problems. But then again, the war also led to the stock market going up by 2002, 2003. And so, I don't know. I wish I had a better, any sort of answer for why that happened. But
no, I'm actually glad the conversation went in this direction, though. Momentum and enthusiasm does seem to play a huge factor in how the stock market works. And I'm wondering what that mindset was during, let's say, the last 25 years. So Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump. And then if we could maybe think about what it's going to be like during Biden. I say this just because there's something, the neoliberal political spin on it, and just the view of like Clinton deregulating Wall Street and since then, for some context.
I don't see Biden being able to put massive regulation in. First off, because he's paid for by Wall Street like everyone else.
Yeah, I don't see him wanting to.
Yeah, I think it would be dangerous for him to even attempt it. I think that where they're headed, I think that like again, maybe he could do a little bit of something on the short selling, but there's no like Glass-Steagall type deregulation that he's going to be able to get away with, especially because the base needs these funds. If you're retired and you're, pretty much almost, no, I shouldn't say almost every, but like such a huge significant portion of the country now is invested anyway. So he can't do too much massive financial regulation. But at some point, when you get into the geopolitical aspect of it, is that like if we're staying on lockdown and, China can lock down maybe one city here and there, but their manufacturing increases, at some point, these things matter. And like, we're not making anything. And we have all these people wanting to work. And I think he's talking infrastructure, and I think he should actually be talking, infrastructure, of course, and like a New Deal type thing, which would be cool, but that would be spending, right? So I don't see that as regulatory. But I think the other thing is he's got to do something for some kind of at-home manufacturing for this to all make sense. And the problem is the longer Americans are staying at home, the less if you are able to make upwards of 100,000 a year trading stocks and just following what a bunch of random people on the internet tell you to do, and that's profitable for you, are you ever going to really want to go back to work? So it's sad to lose a generation. I mean, I think this stuff should be out there as an option for people, but I think you could also lose a generation of people who would normally be impacting society in some positive way. Like Oliver Stone even tried to talk about that in Wall Street. And shouldn't you be making something? And what are you guys actually doing? But I think that's really, the further out we get, the more abstract the idea of actually showing up and making something is. It's I mean, we can't even make our drugs here. I think that I'm hoping at some point Biden will have that kind of be coherent enough to do that, but I don't know. He doesn't seem present enough to even make a decision. So I kind of think of him as like a placeholder. So I don't see really any major changes. Maybe he gets a couple of these spending things through, but I don't know.
I mean,
how do you guys feel about that? Or do you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just curious because like he does have Elizabeth Warren in there doing something, I guess, and then Janet Yellen is left of center, and though she's had some connection to the hedge fund industry, so I don't know. Can you kind of parse in the Biden administration, but maybe without him in the picture, the other players?
Yeah, is there any real political will from anybody to do anything?
No, I honestly, like, I think the whole team is like the most incoherent we've seen. And I think that's, as much as people, hated Trump or whatever, like, but basically on a policy level, there was at least some kind of like pro-business thing. And all the other stuff is nonsense, but like, it looks like Biden is probably going to get us into more like misadventures in the Middle East. He's, there's like the Syria question with him. I think like it's all over the map. So he's got like a quarter of his contingent are like ex-neocons who were pissed off about that Trump didn't include them. So you've got like, I could see John Bolton showing up and being, and if I think it could get that bad. And then you mix that with like some sort of lip service to the ultra left. And then you've got, it's just all garbage. So I kind of feel like he may just be sort of running in place. Like, I don't know if any real change of any sort can happen. And maybe a placeholder is better. I don't know.
I'm going to Google to see if Elliot Abrams still has a job. He might have stayed on in the transition.
Elliot Abrams.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to put it, though. Is incoherent. Because we did maybe in our last episode we were talking about the cabinet picks and kind of just like looking at them as individuals. But and the only thing I could really see was that a lot of them were if you look at Tony Blinken or what's his name, Lloyd Austin and stuff, that they definitely have shady ties to the defense industry and stuff like that. But ideologically, they don't seem to stand for anything at all.
No,
Kamala Harris certainly doesn't stand for anything aside from Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing, is it's just so disjointed. And and at the same time, it's so disjointed that they don't realize, like, we don't want to remove like civilian leadership from the Pentagon. I mean, it's crazy that this is happening, but everything's, we have one voice in the media, and it's like, I don't know what has to happen if this moves forward or just kind of halts, and maybe that changes things. But I'm also really surprised that like policy wise, like that those checks aren't in everyone's hands yet.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, I mean, that just seemed like a layup. Like, that seems like the easiest way to score political points. I don't understand any reason not to do it. Like, because it's going to, like, that is immediately going to make you look good. And it just seemed like the easiest layup possible. And they absolutely shot themselves in the foot by putting it down to 1,400, and then all of a sudden, and then God knows when that's even going to come.
Yeah, and like, and really in the scheme of things, like, it's like, what does that even do when you finally get it? Like, I feel like people are going to be so upset by the time that actually happens that there's not, he could be scoring points if he just like pushed that through like major. Like, he should be on the news every night being like, okay, this is what we have to do, and just like shaming like Republicans or whoever he needs on board. But,
well, especially knowing that I'm of the opinion that had COVID not happened, it would have been very likely that Donald Trump would have cruised into a second term. And I think even with COVID, I think had he maybe sent out maybe one more or two more checks, that could have won him. And it confounds me thinking about the DNC, like, not like how, like, I don't know shit. And how do you not see that?
Yeah. And they have it like, it's still, so polarized, but if you give everybody money, they'll start forgetting about it, and I think like he needs to be doing something on that, because it's not even, it's not even like Reagan era with like trying to lower taxes. This is just like, people can't survive at all. And there's just, or the unemployment process, like the amount of the country that's on unemployment are just still stuck in that limbo waiting for it.
Well, and again, it's not attached to an ideology, like you said, or it's directionless. Like, at least with, I can almost respect a Reagan type figure because they're telling you why they want. I don't respect it, but like, I can almost respect it more of you know,
yeah,
they
like,
have
well, you know at least what it is. You know?
They have a reason why they're doing it, whereas just the thing we always get fed from, you know, the Democratic Party, and seems to be from this administration, is just like, well, it's too hard. We can't we can't do it right now, or something like that.
That's actually something that I wanted to talk about a little bit more. What is Biden inheriting policy-wise or just attitude-wise towards Wall Street from Trump? And then what is he also inheriting from his own party's past? Like, I mean, Obama and Clinton.
It's interesting because like Trump obviously spoke about Wall Street more, but Trump really, for being a billionaire, he really actually was an outsider of that world. And Biden is like part of that world. So I think that it's an easier fit, you know, because it's like Bill Clinton, you know, had that change in the Democratic Party where they basically became full Reagan style corporatists. And I don't think that's ever left the party since. I think Obama was much more nuanced because he was such a gifted politician. But with Biden, you really see the reality of how clunky he is versus the policy. So there's no way to dress it up. Like, it's just like, oh, wait, so this person came from this company, you know, all these pieces of this story where I don't see, I think he's going to be more pro Wall Street, I guess is the short answer. Like,
that's the thing that confuses me too about Biden, is he's so beholden to like credit card companies from his time in Delaware and stuff, and he doesn't seem to be that rich like other people. Like, it doesn't seem to be as much of a quid pro quo with his with his history.
I don't know. I think he is. I think he plays up the everyman thing so much that it actually sort of works. You know.
Okay. So he does have Clinton style money, just hides it better.
Maybe not Clinton money. Clinton's
no one has Clinton money.
Yeah. But yeah, I think he kind of hides some of that. And then the other thing is like all those financial ties, you know, is like, I don't mean to sound like now like on the right wing side, but like those Hunter Biden stories are real, you know, like if you watch like, you know, Glenn Greenwald and his reporting on this, like it's really hard to actually find what happened, but it appears that the story was true. And they're certainly talking about Biden. And it seems presumably like, why would Hunter be talking about his dad and taking these financial stakes? And then you get into this sort of dichotomy. So like, not only is Biden beholden to Wall Street, but Wall Street's, you know, more and more, especially the tech side, requires the, you know, Chinese government on board. So then you're like with this collusion between Wall Street and China. And then that's, you know, so by the time all of this is settled, the last person on the list is like the American public who are going to get anything. You know, like there's so many benefits for like, you know, even with like his immigration policy, like I think we should always have complete open borders. Everyone should be able to come in. But a lot of what Biden's trying to do is to just get engineers, you know, from India and from China and stuff, just to help Silicon Valley anyway. And then that's what, you know, so he's big tech, but he's also the Wall Street end of big tech too. So
that's one thing I wanted to bring up, that in that Greenwald, I don't know if you saw this, Tom, but Ben sent it over to me. Glenn did a short video explainer of the GameStop situation. But he also talked about this kind of like breaking down of the spectrum between left and right, and where Wall Street bets and like Reddit channels fit into that. And there's not really a place. And I'm wondering, kind of outside of that channel, but like in conversations like this, where do you see the new left, if it is the left anymore? Does a political spectrum even exist? Big question, I know, but I know you guys.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that has to happen is the left needs to get the populist like vein back. And Sanders had this, but unfortunately, the main issue I have with Sanders is he's not a big idea person. Like, I think he's basically a decent guy. He has some kind of big picture feeling of like, okay, the little guy's getting screwed, and that's it. He's not like curious enough about the world. He can't really talk. Like, if you hear anything, like, I mean, I want to like Bernie. I mean, I like Bernie certainly out of the field last time, but there's no nuance. There's nothing other than this blanket. And I think that in so doing, he's losing sight of, you know, or the left in general is losing sight of like the idiots who like stormed the Capitol. Most of those guys weren't racist. They're just poor people who, you know, are hungry and they're losing their minds, and they're, you know, and they see the inconsistencies with the way the government's talking to them. And is that a criminal behavior? Certainly. Should they be arrested? Certainly. But like the idea that this is like domestic terrorism is ridiculous. Like, you know, and I think that this level of where we're at for the left to actually really be the left again needs to be populist, because all of these like guys who were storming the Capitol, not, you know, notwithstanding the idiots with Confederate flags, but like the people who are doing it based on like economic livelihoods and just someone not letting them go to work and then not giving them the tools to survive, that is part and parcel with what the left base has always been. And somehow the left is now skewed where it's just like rich intellectuals who don't actually have to go to work and can do okay in that home economy and stuff. And I think the thing that Trump tapped into was the real populist thing, even though he was like a scumbag and his policies weren't populist, but like as far as the messaging, that's what the left needs back, you know? And I don't think it's, you know, I think less and less is like a question of like, you know, pitting groups against each other, because really what's coming down is, you know, identity politics, all that stuff is really vanishing because it's just becoming, there's a power class and then there's the poor people. And I always constantly like whine about like LeBron being a social activist, because I'm like, if you really cared about activism, you're not going to be selling shoes made by Uyghur slaves in China. Like there's not like some debatable thing, you know, you don't have to take that money. If someone's in the NBA and they speak out against Hong Kong and they shut you up, okay, then you're no longer an activist. Like just play the sport, I have no problem, you know, but like we're really in this spot where we've got like the wealthiest people pitting poor people against each other on things that don't really matter in their day-to-day lives. So I think that the left has to just get back to that and focus on like, you know, not everyone's a monster. Like some people are just dumb. They didn't, you know, like, I don't think anyone with that, like with the Capitol thing, it's just so stupid and so like, obviously arrest all those guys, but it's not, you know, this isn't something where we have an organized domestic terror movement in this country. Like it's not that. And they keep talking about like it's 9/11. It's like, what? It's not like 9/11 scale anything. You know?
And stop talking about fucking Russia.
Yeah.
talking about betting on a shitty stock that's not getting you anywhere. I mean, I thought when Trump, I'm gonna start going off on a tangent here, but I think it's related to this rich poor thing of like we've been inundated with this for 4 years, and I really kind of foolishly thought it would go away once Trump was out of office. And then the Capitol riot happens, and then all of a sudden you have Hillary Clinton saying, "Oh, well, you know, this is probably a Russian thing." And then I heard someone the other day, or there's been a few people who have tried to say that the GameStop thing,
Jimmy Kimmel,
Jimmy Kimmel, and someone else on MSNBC, I think, or no, it was someone talking to Jim Cramer, and Cramer was like, "What?" But yeah, it's just I don't know. I just needed to rant about that for a second. But it's just it's this other thing that's like, when are we going to get over this and talk about something real? Because first of all, the people that stormed the Capitol or anybody else don't give a shit about Russia or Vladimir Putin, and it just seems to be again betting on this losing number that isn't getting us anywhere.
And also
it
just
should be noted. I just have to say this real quick. It should be noted. Ben is wearing a Russian baths shirt.
I was going to ask you.
Check your inherent biases, Ben.
I saw the Russian on one side. I didn't see it.
Yeah, this is my free merch.
Our sponsor. Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that with like the Russian thing, it's so interesting because, okay, we just got through, you know, having 4 years of saying Trump was elected by the Russians. Then all the way up until the election, everyone's saying the Russians are hacking the election, right? Every, you know, Rachel Maddow, every network, you know, other than like Fox or whatever, or Newsmax or some bullshit, but like says how dangerous this is and the Russians are interfering. Then we have the election and, you know, Biden wins the most votes in any history of anyone. And they're like, oh yeah, it's the most secure election ever. So both of those things can't be true. Like if there's a Russian thing happening, we can say Biden won, but we have to say, oh, you know what? He should have won by more, or he should, like this election, we know that there's some kind of like, maybe not voter fraud, but if the Russians really were hacking everything, like, so I think that's part of, you know, what's going on. And when you don't have actual like real journalists and people just, you know, attacking both sides of every issue, you know, like you it's almost like it's unwatchable because there's no story like, but if you look at like Washington Post, like a month before the election, they're still talking about the Russians. So how come the Russian influence on the election now just disappeared because Biden won and now it's the most secure election in history?
Yeah, and lo and behold, CNN and MSNBC's numbers are down like 40% since Biden went into office.
Yeah, that's my feeling where they want to do the impeachment now. It's like, who cares? The guy's out, like, just,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, they want to get the ratings
Trump
up.
to run again. They should want Trump to run again. They'll split the Republican vote, and a Republican will never win for like the next 5 years, you know?
Yeah, that would absolutely be the greatest thing in the world for them if Trump got back. I mean, Trump back on Twitter would be good for everybody in the left-wing media as far as their bottom line. But I wonder, going back to what you said about having an actual populist message, I mean, isn't that I mean, I know you don't work in media, but isn't it like if they actually wanted people to listen to them again, is there any other way to do it other than having a populist message talking about things that people actually care about?
Yeah, I think there's such a disrespect for the public that I don't even think they're aware of it, because like I said, like if the knee-jerk reaction is to just sort of get the poor people to hate each other for whatever stupid identity type of thing that no one really cares about en masse, like obviously there's idiots everywhere, but like the process of that, it just means they have a level of detachment that they don't understand real people. It's like that Biden thing. Remember when a guy was, I forget when Biden was calling the guy fat or whatever, and like,
yeah.
But that, it was just like, that wasn't even just the insult of it, but it was like the detachment from regular people. Cause like, it's not ageist. Like the guy's like, oh, I'm about the same age. This would be hard for me. And he's like, listen, fat. And it was like, so an elitist just saying, well, of course I'm not like you, I've got like trainers and whatever, Biden things that like why it makes him better than another 80-year-old man.
Yeah. He's like challenging people to push-up contests. So we should do a greatest hits at some point of just Biden yelling at his own supporters.
I'd like to think the greatest hits are yet to come.
Yeah. Oh, we've got 4 years of that. But yeah, I did want to just round it back to what Dan had said about Greenwald talking about the subreddit being really like apolitical, and the idea of this trying to sow discontent between making it a left thing or making it a right thing. Like it really seems like this thing with Robinhood and Wall Street Bets was not left or right at all. It was just a bunch of people collectively saying, fuck you.
Yeah.
to is it like, and the fact that
Tom even called it Occupy Wall Street, kind of organized Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah, and the fact that
now they listen.
And the fact that no one's respecting that, it's depressing and it's disheartening. But
and then it is interesting though to see like Ted Cruz and AOC on the same page on a couple of things, just like which I thought was really fascinating. I mean, of course they're like throwing punches again, but like that was cool at the beginning. I'm like,
it was cool for a second, but then like Ted Cruz agreed with her, and the first thing she did was just attack him about it because he was Republican. And like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to defend Ted Cruz for fuck's sake, but still, it was just like, you're missing opportunities here.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to like regular people. It would be so easy right now. Like Biden could really, if he just had, I mean, unfortunately, I do think he's actually senile. And I don't think, because I think if Joe Biden had run the first time, and I think he didn't run against, and this is my conspiracy theory, but I think that all those Hunter things and the issues of him, him on the take for different companies, I think those are real. And I think that the Clintons had said, you're not going in this time or we're coming out with such and such, because there's no way he came from being a sitting VP to saying, I'm not going to run. And then 4 years later, he's so upset about Trump, he decides to run now. Like that was like, they told him to get out of that race. And I think that him at that point was coherent enough that he might've been able to understand like the common person slightly, and at least get the messaging. Because this is really, like you said, I mean, you could easily, with the modicum of effort, see where this is all headed and be like, oh, I can get the support of everyone. Like, and he could actually get, because the Donald Trump base that everyone's, saying are like crazies, that's the biggest portion of that are populists, a lot of whom voted for Obama 2 times, right? So if he really got that messaging in, Trump loses all of that in that really wackadoodle wing of the party. And then that goes back to being Democrat. And like, he could actually, genuinely get support. And even when he's gone, that ticket could do well again. And I think now, unfortunately, it's just so divisive because he's not doing it. And it gives too much ammunition for like a third party if, I don't know that, sure, I'm just kind of, spouting nonsense, but like, I think that I don't understand it other than like him losing his mind, why he's not going for that.
I actually love that optimism. And it's kind of a note on Sanders that I wanted to mention earlier. When you're talking about his 2020 race, it's so sad what happened in 2020 versus 2016, because I feel like 2016 Sanders was much more concise in his arguments, whereas 2020 was kind of like a pâté of like what he used to be. He was the shell of like former anti-establishment candidate. I mean, he was even spouting the Russiagate lines, and it was bad. I mean, it's still supportive, of course.
Yeah, but even with the impeachment, Sanders should be like, listen, we can get to all that, but first let's get some relief for the American public, and then we'll worry about fighting a battle of some idiot who's already out of office. And even Biden too, like Biden could have scored so many points if he just said, we're not going to do this right now, we'll get to it later. There's so many in that Trump base who's like, okay, I'm tired of the rhetoric, that would immediately be supporting Biden had he just taken the high road. You know?
Yeah, there's no reason for the expediency. I mean, I suppose I get, wanting to make sure that he never runs again or what, but like the idea that it needs to happen in the first 100 days or something. Why? And aren't we all enjoying not hearing from him for a little while?
And they should want him to run again. They should want him to run again. If he runs again, the Republican Party split down the middle. Yep. They clean up for a generation, maybe, like if you start it off right enough. So I don't understand why they want to dismantle that. I mean, I get that like the new Cheney wing of the Biden administration doesn't like that, but they should really want Trump to run again.
Yeah.
Is that the Cheney wing of the Biden administration? That's all the questions I have. I know we're kind of at time, but Ben, I'll let you take us home.
Yeah, I think that's all I have.
Yeah, and hopefully you can do some edits in the beginning. It took me a while as we get the flow.
No, not at all. That was awesome. Yeah. Tom, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much. And it was really it's good to, like I said, just kind of like demystify this sort of subject and remember that it's also, these aren't isolated. This doesn't occur in a vacuum, that this actually does connect to everything else. There is a past, present, and future with all of these. So thank you.
And just remember, buy Doge 9:00 tonight.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Actually, give us the hot tip. We're not going to play this.
The hot tip on the Reddit.
Let's do some insider trading.
So this now it's going to sound like I'm talking about Elon Musk too much, but so Elon has this. He's always pumping the fake crypto Doge. So it came out in 2013 as a joke. The founders of Doge disassociate themselves with it. It's garbage. Unlike Bitcoin, which has a finite number of coins, Doge is unlimited. So by rights, it shouldn't increase in value because they just keep making more of them. But nonetheless, it's up like 300% for maybe even the last week, it's up 300%. So anyway, so Elon Musk last night tweeted about Doge. It had another big spike up. And then tonight at 9:00, the Redditors are saying they're going to all start buying Doge at the same time. So the question is, does that lead to another bump up? So like last week it went up like, I don't know, like 70%. It added like $3 billion in value. Now it's worth like $6 billion. And now, mind you, before the year started, it was worth like a couple $100 million or something. So the hot tip tonight is at 9:00 Eastern Standard, buy Doge, and we're going to see if it levitates the Pentagon, and that's, So I'm actually doing the same thing. I'm like, this is so interesting. If it works, it's exciting, and because it's like literally everyone acknowledges there's no utility to the crypto.
Tom, can you spell Doge just for people?
It's Dogecoin, so it's DOGE. And it's like Dogcoin, but it's after like a breed of dog. But if you do a quick Google, you'll see it. But DOGE, which you can buy on the Robinhood platform, 9:00 tonight.
Oh yeah. Well, Tom, thank you again. This has been great.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this week's episode of Villain for All Seasons with myself, Ben, and my co-host, Dan. We're going to be back next week with all new adventures, all new stories to tell. Come and find out what they are.